Hey lifers, Dustin here, and today I wanted to put out just a random, fun, just completely nonsense video. As you know, if you've spent probably any amount of time on my channel, I love the idea of conference realignment. I love thinking about future conference matchups. I love non-conference scheduling and trying to think about who could play who in the future. When I had the NCAA, the EA Sports games, I loved scheduling non-conference, out-of-conference schedules. I just love this stuff. It's like a random nerdy thing of mine because I love college football so much. I just love the idea of teams that don't play often or have never played finally playing. So that's why I ended up making this video. Basically, I was thinking to myself one day when I was driving, boy, if I could have done conference alignment from the start, if I was a commissioner in like 1900 and I could have just made all of these teams be in conferences since then and they had to stay in them, what would I have done? What would have been my parameters to do so? And then the more I thought about it, the more I started sketching it out, the more I started drawing names and writing names and grouping people together and defining what it means to be a conference to me. And that's how we ended up getting this video. So basically, if you're lost, I understand. What I'm trying to talk about in this video is if I was some kind of a magical college football connoisseuring conference, I don't know another C word, conference manager back then, and I could like actually make the conferences myself, how would I have done it? Well, what I really love about conferences is that all the teams are close together. Most of them live in the same type of region, right? You don't have to travel very far. All the fan bases can pretty much drive to everywhere else in the conference within reasonable expectation. And I love 12 teams. I think that's the perfect way for a conference to go. You have two divisions rather of 6 teams. Those teams, the winners of the division, meet in a conference championship game at a neutral site location. I love that. That's how I built this list. In order to do that, I had to add a few teams to the mix. So, we're keeping you Idaho. You know I love you, Vandals. So we're going to keep you in this. Also, we're going to allow the Coastal Carolina and Liberty FCS to FBS transitions in as well. And we're going to add 10 other college football teams from the FCS ranks in order to make it an even 144. Just kidding. I just checked my notes. I actually added 12 FCS teams to make it 144. Which makes more sense. Now, as I go through this, just remember that I tried to keep as many states together, or teams in each state together as I could. Obviously, the math doesn't quite work that well. I had to split up some in Ohio, some in Michigan. I tried really, really hard to keep everybody together. It just didn't quite work out that way because 12 is such a weird number, and there's a lot of, like, if you add Ohio and Michigan together, it's 13 teams. You can't make that one conference. So, had to leave some people out. Also, you are going to have to get rid of any notion you have of tradition, of rivalries, because this is like 1900. Those rivalries aren't there. You know, Ohio State and Michigan don't hate each other yet. Certainly not to the level they do now. I'll go ahead and spoil it. They're not in the same conference. Things had to be made. And yes, I know that like Florida State didn't start playing football until the 50s or whatever. Like a lot of these teams picked up football after 1900. It's a fantasy thing. Just let me have fun. By the way, let me introduce you to the 12 FCS teams that I brought into the FBS. So welcome. New Hampshire, Villanova, North Dakota State, Montana, Eastern Washington, Northern Iowa, Illinois State, Youngstown State, Wofford, Furman, Richmond, and James Madison. Now, I am going to be having a video coming out in a few weeks that actually a subscriber suggested to me about FCS teams that should be in the FBS. This is not really my list. At least I don't think so. Most of this was based on geography, though obviously I don't know every FCS team in the country, so these are the ones that stood out to me, mostly for winning, or because Furman and Wofford are right beside me. But yeah, the winning helps them get notoriety, but for the most part, it's also mostly based on their geography. Okay, now that we've done several minutes of me actually explaining it, let's go over the conferences, and I'll tell you how I put it together and all that jazz. The first conference, I'm just going to call the Lone Star Conference because there are 12 FBS teams in Texas. In the Lone Star North, you're going to have Texas Tech, North Texas, TCU, SMU, Baylor, and UTEP. And in the South, you have UTSA, San Antonio, Texas State, Texas, Rice, Houston, Texas A&M. Literally, you just look at the state of Texas and you draw a line between Baylor and Texas A&M. Everyone north of that line is in the north. Everyone south of that is in the south. And of course, the conference championship game is played in Dallas. Now, when I made this list, I started with 4 different places. So I started, I guess for you guys it would be California. Yeah, California is over here. And then Texas. And then I did the Northeast. And I did Florida. So that's how I kind of started the conferences. So the very first one I did was Texas because it was the easiest. Next, we're going to move into what I'm calling the Pac-12. The Pac-12 North, you have Washington, Washington State, Oregon, Oregon State, Cal, and Stanford. Well, that looks pretty similar. USC, UCLA, Hawaii, San Diego State, San Jose State, and Fresno State. And of course, their conference championship game is played in Los Angeles. Next up, we have what I'm going to call the Northeastern Conference. And in this one, in the Northeast North, you have New Hampshire, UMass, Boston College, UConn, Syracuse, and Buffalo. And in the Northeastern South, you have Pittsburgh, Penn State, Temple, Villanova, Rutgers, and Army. I put Army in the South because they're right next to the New Jersey line. And of course, their conference championship game is going to be played at the home of the Philadelphia Eagles, Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Starting with Florida and working our way north, you're going to have what I'm calling the Sunshine Conference. And in the Sunshine, you're going to have Sunshine South is Miami, FAU, FIU, South Florida, Central Florida, and Florida. Sunshine North is Florida State, Troy, Georgia, Georgia State, Georgia Tech, and Georgia Southern. I did it this way because Florida State is so close to the state of Georgia compared to all the other Florida schools, and trying to keep the conference championship game as neutral as I can and as close as I can. I could put it in Atlanta, but instead I'm going to put it in Tampa. Okay, so those are my 4 starting points, and from there things get a little weird. So I'm going to start working my way from the west to the east. Everything is backwards the way I look at it. From the west to the east, and we're going to do this in what I call the Mountain West Conference. In the Mountain West, you have Montana, Eastern Washington, Idaho, Boise State, UNLV, and Nevada. And in the East, you have Utah, Utah State, BYU, Wyoming, Arizona, Arizona State. And the championship game, they are lucky enough, it will be in Las Vegas, probably at the new Raiders Stadium. Next, we're going to have what I'm calling the Central Conference. And in the Central East, you're going to have Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Tulsa, Kansas, Kansas State, and North Dakota State. And in the Central West, you're going to have New Mexico, New Mexico State, Nebraska, Air Force, Colorado, and Colorado State. I wanted to put the conference championship game in Kansas City, and then I'm dumb, and I remember Kansas City is in Missouri, and there's no state in Missouri in this conference, so I put it in Denver. All right, now we're going to go up and over the previous conferences, and we're going to go into what I'm calling the Old Northwest Conference. Remember, if you know anything about history, this used to be the Northwestern Territories, I hope, because that's what I named the conference. In the Old Northwest West, you have Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, Iowa State, Northern Iowa, and Illinois State. In the East, you have Northern Illinois, Illinois, Northwestern, Michigan, Michigan State, and Notre Dame. Sorry, Irish, you joined a conference. Not finally. You have always been in a conference, and this independence thing was never really an issue. And your conference championship game is in Chicago, so bring a scarf. Now moving on from Texas eastward, we're going to go into what I'm calling the Sun Belt Conference. In the Sun Belt South, you have LSU, Southern Miss, Louisiana Lafayette, Louisiana Monroe, Louisiana Tech, and Tulane. In the Sun Belt North, you have Alabama, Auburn, Ole Miss, UAB, South Alabama, Mississippi State. And their conference championship game is in New Orleans. Moving a little bit north from there, we're going to go into what I'm calling the Frontier Conference. In the Frontier West, you have Arkansas, Arkansas State, Missouri, Memphis, Middle Tennessee, and Vanderbilt. And in the Frontier East, you have Miami of Ohio, Cincinnati, Kentucky, Tennessee, Louisville, and Western Kentucky. Miami and Cincinnati are right on the Kentucky line, so I kind of carved them out of the state of Ohio. So sorry guys, you're being broken up. And their conference championship game is in the very beautiful capital city of Nashville. Now, before I reveal the Michigan and Ohio schools, which are the ones that gave me, the Michigan, Ohio, Indiana really is what gave me the biggest headache, we're going to go here into the Carolinas and go into what I'm calling the Carolina Conference. In the Carolina South, you have Clemson, South Carolina, Wofford, Coastal Carolina, Furman, and Charlotte. And in the Carolina North, you have App State, NC State, Duke, Wake Forest, North Carolina, and East Carolina. I'm sorry, Charlotte, you're so much further south than all the other schools. I'm sorry that a team from North Carolina has to be in the Carolina South Division. I understand. But your conference championship game is at Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte, so that's pretty cool. Now we go into what I'm calling the Ohio Valley Conference. In the Ohio Valley North, you have Eastern Michigan, Western Michigan, Central Michigan, Toledo, Youngstown State, and Kent State. And in the Ohio Valley South, you have Akron, Purdue, Ball State, Indiana, Bowling Green, and Ohio. Yeah, this is mostly just the MAC, right? But I don't really want to call it the Mid-American Conference because I don't want to. So it's the Ohio Valley Conference. Yet their conference championship game is in Indianapolis. Isn't that weird? My last and final conference here is what I'm going to be calling the Appalachian Conference. And I'm going to say the first name in this Appalachian Conference, but for the most part it makes sense. In the Appalachian West, you have Ohio State, I know, Ohio, Marshall, West Virginia, Virginia Tech, and Liberty. And in the Appalachian East, you have Maryland, Navy, Old Dominion, Richmond, Virginia, and James Madison. And they play their conference championship in Washington, D.C. So there you have it, a little nonsense video. It picked my brain. And I've done this in the past too because, I don't know, I'm lonely or something. So I've done this plenty of times in the past, and each time it works out differently. I always start with California, Texas, the Northeast, and Florida though, and kind of work my way. It's the Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio, Michigan, Illinois part that always kind of screws things up because they're just not nice and neat there. So depending on what FCS teams you add, what FBS teams you take away, and how many conferences you want, kind of changes the course of what you're trying to do there. But I don't know, it's a completely ridiculous video. I understand it's a nonsense video. Hopefully it got you thinking a little bit. I'm sorry, Ohio State, that you're in something called the Appalachian Conference. It's just the way it goes sometimes. Let me know what you think about this down below. Where did your team fall? Would you like the division and the conference you were in? Just let me know down below. This is also a reminder that I put out another video, a real video today, about what we define as the greatest college football upset of all time. I give 4 case examples and kind of go into it a little bit more. A link to that is going to be in the end screen here in just a second, so make sure to check that out after this video. Thank y'all so much for watching. I really appreciate it. As always, if you enjoyed it, give it a big old thumbs up. Also, click the circle of the trophy right there in order to subscribe or catch any of the videos over here to the right to enjoy more college football videos. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, until next time. I've done. What would have been my parameters to do so? And then the more I thought about it, the more I started sketching it out, the more I started drawing names and writing names and grouping people together and defining what it means to be a conference to me. And that's how we ended up getting this video. I just love this stuff. It's like a random nerdy thing of mine because I love college football so much. I just love the idea of teams that don't play often or have never played finally playing. So that's why I ended up making this video. Basically, hey lifers, Dustin here, and today I wanted to put out just a random, fun, just completely nonsense video. As you know, if you've spent probably any amount of time on my channel, I love the idea of conference realignment. I love thinking about future conference matchups. I love non-conference scheduling and trying to think about who could play who in the future. When I had the NCAA, the EA Sports games, I loved scheduling non-conference, out-of-conference schedules. I was thinking to myself one day when I was driving, boy, if I could have done conference alignment from the start, if I was a commissioner in like 1900 and I could have just made all of these teams be in conferences since then, and they had to stay in them, what would